Hello and welcome to Muhabbit, the biggest crypto community of Turkey. Well, we're quite excited for the very first English live stream, and particularly myself, I'm quite struggling on public speech, but we will try our best and please bear with us. And a quick disclaimer about the session. For those who tuned in via Discord, there will be a live translation by my co-hosts Koenç and Pisozo. They will be translating Turkish. And for the ones who couldn't make the live session tonight, don't worry. Eventually, we will be updating the YouTube video with the Turkish subtitles. Tonight, we are very excited to welcome our special guest, Murad Mahmudov. Welcome, Murad.
Hey, guys. Thanks for the invite.
That's amazing to have you in the session. So he has recently become very popular on Twitter with his positive views about the future of Bitcoin in this bear market particularly, and his optimistic views about Bitcoin is not only on fundamentals or value proposition or monetary theory behind the Bitcoin, but also in the price predictions for the long term backed with his technical analysis. So I would like to start with a brief introduction about yourself, Murad, particularly your journey in crypto and investing in general.
Yeah, so I originally got into Bitcoin when I was living in China. Back when I was at university, I spent a year as an exchange student in Beijing. And kind of lucky for me, I guess, that was a late 2013, early 2014, when, yeah, so that was when the previous bubble was sort of happening and the subsequent sort of bear market as well. So essentially, that's how I got my first exposure to Bitcoin. A lot of my both Russian and American friends were, back then, the Chinese exchanges still didn't have a lot of liquidity. And some of my American friends were essentially bringing some Bitcoins into China, selling them at a small premium to the local Chinese. In that whole sort of time period, I went to a bunch of Bitcoin meetups in Beijing, a couple of sort of just like meetups and sort of organized events, etc. And that's sort of how I got into the space. As many people who first got into the space in 2013 didn't really do much during 2015, 2014. However, sort of when Ethereum came back on the scene, some of my roommates in university, who were engineers, really told me to look at Ethereum. So I was sort of got into Ethereum relatively early, like late spring 2016. And essentially after that, I've been sort of delving into the space more and more. Worked on Wall Street for a little bit after college, but just really found it harder and harder to focus on legacy and traditional markets when just such an amazing, fascinating, both on a technological as well as a monetary and philosophical point of view, event and phenomena such as cryptocurrencies was really taking off. And so since then, I've just been in the crypto space full time and just trying to do more and more things in the space every day.
So it's interesting. I think most of the early adapters, let's say, when they first heard the Bitcoin, it's just a playground project. They hear about it, they play around with that, they create, just install the node, they mine it, and then just leave them alone. What made you think that it is the future or it has the potential and you want to dig more on Bitcoin and its fundamentals? Hello? Can you hear me, Murad?
Yes.
Okay, so I was trying to ask, including myself, most of the early adapters, they just heard about Bitcoin, play around with that. It's just a toy, a new technology maybe, and then they let them go. What made you think that it might have the potential for the future?
Yeah, for sure. In my opinion, Bitcoin is so here's the thing. A lot of people, there's a big debate in the community whether one should spend Bitcoin or whether one should just hold on to them. When you also start talking to your friends about this stuff, they ask things like, oh, okay, but where can I spend it? Oh, but what can I buy with it? However, and I guess this is something that I want to, I talk about this a lot, and I really, really hope that everybody in this space just understands this as quickly as possible. But the point is this. In my opinion, cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin aren't so much about technology as they are about monetary economics, the reinvention of money, and monetary theory. Of course, we are using technology in this case to achieve our goals, but I think in terms of what is going to be driving this market and the main sort of use cases and the main functionalities, it has to do with money. And actually, I think that for the time being, spending Bitcoin is actually not a good idea, especially if it's not something that requires censorship resistance, or if you still have a lot of fiat currencies left, or you're just buying an everyday normal thing. Spending cryptocurrencies is quite senseless, in my opinion, because nobody wants to be that famous pizza guy from the past, and it kind of comes back to the point that why if like it's spending Bitcoin today is like spending Google stock in 2001. It just like makes no sense. Why would you be spending something that can still go 100x or even 500x more in the future? And that's why it's important to discuss the monetary progression of Bitcoin. And I actually have a small chart to share. I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah, while you search for that, in fact, I was about to ask that question as well. We have seen your views on and reasons behind your trust on Bitcoin in Twitter. And you have perfectly articulated them on Anthony's podcast, Off the Chain. And for those who hasn't listened to the episode yet, I strongly recommend it. Murad is killing it. It's an amazing one. I was about to ask, what are the aspects in particular that, and you already briefly touched on monetary theory behind it.
Yeah. So the thing is this, right? A lot of people, money has several use cases. The most important are store of value, which is where you can take your wealth across time and space. The main one is medium of exchange, which essentially money comes about as a emergent, spontaneous order, because it essentially is a tool to solve the barter problem, so that we wouldn't have to barter, and instead people would be allowed to specialize on their own crafts. And the third is, of course, the unit of account, which is essentially a way to price things. Now, there's a lot of debate, both in the crypto community as well as even in like academic economics, about how money comes about, what it is, but also what's the progression. And I really share my view with Nick Szabo, who's one of the most prominent, essentially, people in the entire cryptocurrency history, the creator of the BitGold protocol, as well as original smart contract creator. Essentially, the idea is that we believe that whatever eventually becomes money first starts as a collectible, then as it becomes more liquid and it essentially gets a bigger market cap, it slowly can act as a store of value. So kind of roughly like what gold is today. As it becomes even more stable and even more liquid, most importantly, like as it lowers its volatility, it can eventually become a medium of exchange, which is essentially something that people use for commerce, trade, etc. And then once as it continues growing even more, as the infrastructure and stability improves even more, it can be much more stable, and it can finally act as a unit of account. And with all of those three, it can be considered to be full money. Now, this has created a lot of contention in this space, and a lot of people, such as many of Bitcoin Cash supporters, many of Litecoin supporters, Nano supporters, and other sort of coins which focus on payments or speed or low fees. I believe every single one of those people is making a big mistake, because in my opinion, people don't want their day-to-day cash, i.e. their medium of exchange, to be, they essentially want their cash to be stable, and they want it to be liquid and reliable. However, even Bitcoin, which is the biggest cryptocurrency at the moment, is still very volatile, relatively illiquid, and not very recognizable and saleable across the world. It's still very much growing. Essentially, Bitcoin is still slowly growing its monetary premium across years, and it's slowly becoming closer and closer to gold. I think right now we need to focus on security. We need to focus on trust, perceived trustworthiness, and reliability. We need to build that base foundation of the pyramid. And once the market cap gets bigger, once it becomes more liquid, then it is going to be more usable, more conveniently usable as a medium of exchange. And most importantly, right now, as we said, there exist disincentives to spend. So a lot of people don't want to spend something because they know that the total market for money in the world is like $95 trillion. So if Bitcoin is to be not a winner, but if it even to be as big as gold is today, that means that there's still a lot of gains to be had. And if that is true, then you once again want to focus on the store of value first. The bigger it gets, the less the disincentives to spend are, because there are smaller gains ahead. However, for now, I think we should be focused on credibility of monetary policy, security, and trustworthiness, and just sort of improving the robustness of this technology. But that's sort of my view.
Yeah, interesting and very great points about Bitcoin. But I have a question regarding the expectation of the, or let's say that there isn't any incentive to spend the Bitcoin. That has an assumption of people will be buying Bitcoin, and because the Bitcoin has a limited number of coins that you can buy, the price of the Bitcoin will increase. Is that really the case? Is anything that's scarce is always valuable?
Yeah, so that's a common question in the space. I think like we historically had proof that that is not really like a huge problem. Although Bitcoin's monetary policy is even stricter than gold, gold is growing at a rate of around 1.6% per year. Eventually, Bitcoin will be zero. However, I don't think that this will be that big of a problem, because at the end of the day, the demand for money is only so much. I mean, it can't grow infinitely. Now, unlike current fiat currencies, which lose 2% per year in value, in the best case, of course, Bitcoin will probably at equilibrium, at a final equilibrium, Bitcoin will probably gain around 2% per year, maybe 1% per year, maybe 2.5%, but it will essentially be correlated with the overall growth of the economy. Similar actually effects can historically be observed with gold. In the mid to late 19th century, the economy in Europe, for example, was growing much faster than gold supply was, and essentially gold's value year to year was generally increasing, but the economy didn't stop. In fact, there was the highest number of inventions and highest number of sort of engineering breakthroughs relative to history in that particular time period. People still invented, people still consumed, people still spent money and invested money. However, things will definitely change with the way the current financial system works today. In a mildly deflationary system, there would be less debt and there would be more equity. because essentially there is a lot of interest rates would generally be higher, and the quality and the hardness of money would be higher. Our central banks and governments currently are artificially reducing interest rates quite often, but it is really unsustainable, because if the interest rates around the world and even locally would be left to the free markets, it is extremely likely that they would be higher than what central banks mandate that they are. And what they're essentially doing is creating these credit bubbles, and they are taking wealth from the future and pulling it into the present. And that's why I believe that not just in money, but in a lot of different aspects of life, human decision making in the coming 20, 30, 40 years will increasingly be replaced with mathematics, algorithms, and cryptography. And I myself am 23 or 24 years old, but I believe that my generation and the generation sort of around me, we like to trust digital things. We like to trust transparent things, and we like to trust things that we can see sort of the mathematics or the code behind it, as opposed to some opaque process where 8 or 9 old men behind closed doors decide what's going to happen. And I think that people will increasingly gravitate to the transparency, to the immutability, and most importantly, to the disinflation of Bitcoin, because it is going to be the kind of money that nobody can take, not just directly, but nobody can take through inflation as well. Because essentially, some academics or some thinkers believe that inflation or money supply expansion, when coupled with a monopoly on the money supply, is whenever money supply gets expanded, it weakens purchasing power of everyone who's already holding the currency. And Bitcoin was designed precisely to stop that, among other things. But in early Satoshi writings on the cypherpunk forums, you can read that we don't necessarily need to trust central banks anymore not to debase the currency. And the full nodes around the world which commit to a certain software, full node software of Bitcoin Core, and that are all in very strict consensus with one another, are self-interested and incentivized to ensure that the 21 million unit Bitcoin scarce limit is never broken.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of your quote on Anthony's podcast that you said code by code. I would like to say we never had an object, let alone a money, as scarce as Bitcoin before. And that reminds me one thing. I'm not really sure it is 100% related to what we're talking about or cryptocurrency, but at some point, not just only gold, in the late 18th centuries, land was perceived as scarce as well. So people were buying lands because they were assuming that the population will increase, they need more housing, more food supplies and all that stuff. And they were thinking it's a fixed, you can't have more land, at least at the time of the century. And they were thinking that it will be the future and the price of the lands will increase parabolically. But we all witness and we have been witness that it is not the case, because they haven't considered the efficiency, the technology, and improvements on agriculture and housing market and all that stuff as well. So is there something that we are not considering for Bitcoin as well? Are we just too hopeful, or will there be some other things that would come in near future or long future that would disprove our comments about Bitcoin right now regarding the scarcity?
I don't think so, because we need to understand that Bitcoin is trying to be a monetary good, which is a non-productive good. It doesn't have cash flows. It doesn't have fundamental resources. However, land is a productive good, and it's not a money. Money needs to be portable. It needs to be transportable. It needs to be divisible. It needs to be fungible, and essentially, it needs to have these certain properties to be able to act as money. Throughout history, when you look at shells, when you look at certain types of jewelry, certain types of metals, silver, even cows, etc., they had these properties to some extent. Land obviously cannot be moved, and it's not fungible, and it's really hard to divide. So it is I don't think it is appropriate to analyze it from a monetary point of view.
Yeah,
I
it was
think
more about scarcity, not the monetary
yes,
aspect of it, but it was more about the scarcity.
right, for sure. So yes, the technology can the technology essentially made it so that land doesn't necessarily always increase in value, or at least as much as you like people predicted in your example. However, I think that if the world adopts Bitcoin as money, it will keep growing for like many years forward in value, because what people use as a savings vehicle right now, or as an investment vehicle right now, like bonds, like stock market, etc. Even land, actually. Like a lot of, not a lot, but small chunks of that value, as well as like gold and fiat currencies are today, mainly flow into Bitcoin. I guess the answer to your question depends on to what extent Bitcoin is going to dominate the world economy. My view is that like in America today, if you are a successful employee or a successful businessman, you really just like, even in America, and I'm talking about a place where you have like one of the strongest currencies in the world, you can't really in money, which is quite weird, because during thousands of years when we have save your wealth in gold, and you would know that if it wouldn't like grow in value, it would at least preserve value. And fiat currency obviously is constantly losing value, and obviously that's done deliberately to maximize consumption, and I guess in the short term. But my belief is that that is unsustainable, and the free market will end up choosing a currency which is impossible to print, and I think that people will gravitate towards it. The supply is essentially fixed. I will continue 20 years to come or more, and as such, this isn't for many years to come. Some people have talked about what you just mentioned, in the sense that maybe in the far future, we wouldn't just need money quite as much, and everything would be like more automated, and we would like allocate it like resources more algorithmically. But there's many more decades until that, and for the time being, I expect that not to be a problem and the price to continue growing.
Oh, okay, thank you. It's a good point, actually. And you mentioned the strength of the currency in particular countries like the United States. And I would really like to hear your views on the importance of Bitcoin or crypto for the countries like Azerbaijan and Turkey. Is it only protecting the wealth or the money against the inflation and monetary disinflation, or do you see any other opportunities in this landscape?
Yeah, there are many things that Bitcoin does. It actually solves 3 or 4 problems at the same time. The inflation is just one of them, even though I consider it to be the most interesting and the most important, and the biggest sort of the biggest new paradigm. But also, Bitcoin allows you to make payments and do. For example, Mongolian friend send money to their friend in Brazil just a couple of days ago, and he did that without asking any Mongolian or Brazilian bank, Mongolian or Brazilian central bank, without asking MoneyGram, World Bank, Bank of International Settlements, Western, and the ability to anyone around the world in a truly peer-to-peer fashion is absolutely amazing, very refreshing, very light and quick, and it just feels like pure freedom. Not only are you pay fees to men and a bunch of banks in the middle, but even more importantly, they can't necessarily just like stop your transaction or see your transaction and be able to censor you. And that uncensorability is the second thing. But third thing, which many people, even the fact that nobody can seize your wealth. Many times throughout history, we saw governments take people's gold. Many bank accounts in Cyprus, in Greece, in other countries around the world, just freeze again. But with Bitcoin and with the help of cryptography, you can essentially store anywhere from $1 to $1 billion, and nobody can take it away from you. It's only in your head, as long as you remember and store your private key safely. And I think that's going to be absolutely incredible in the next 50 years.
Well, amazing, especially in this bear market. Everyone are frustrated, and I'm sure they're all happy to hear all those positive views about the future of Bitcoin. Personally, I'm happy to leave. Thanks for explanation, all the details. And if we change our perspective, if we really want to think from the other side of the spectrum, what are some specific roadblocks to watch out for the future of Bitcoin? Yes, we are very hopeful about it. Yeah, we have lots of expectations and hope and trust or beliefs, whatever you would like to say. But to achieve all of those, what are the potential roadblocks? Or in other words, what could fail the blockchain revolution for you? Hello? I guess we have a small connection problem with Murad. Meanwhile, I'll be checking the chats on Discord, and hopefully by that time Murad can join us.
Hop o kadar çok adam foot'la ilgili bir soru beklemiyordu. Hep FOMO. Adam kilitlendi, mavi ekran verdi galiba.
It wasn't much about FUD. I was more hoping to exposure some roadblocks to improve the future of Bitcoin, but let's see. I think he has some connection problems. I can't even see him in Hangouts yet. Meanwhile, ya da burayı Türkçe söyleyebilirim arkadaşlar. Sorularınız varsa muhabbet sohbetten paylaşabilirsiniz.
Vallahi biz çok eğleniyoruz ya Hop şu anda. Sana da çok teşekkür ederiz. Mükemmel sunuyorsun.
Estağfurullah ya, ben
Çok
bayağı
keyif aldım.
heyecanlıyım.
Sorular var. Çok soru var.
Sorry, guys. This there for a second, but I'm.
That's fine, no worries, Murad.
Okay,
I think we had a break. We needed a break anyway. I think it's an opportunity to force Konuğu to translate all what we have talked so far. It's not a big deal. Yeah. Is everything okay with your connection right now?
Yep. I changed to a better internet.
That's amazing. So I was about to ask, what are some specific roadblocks to watch out for the future of Bitcoin or crypto assets in general? Or let's say in this way, what could fail the blockchain revolution?
Yeah, so I actually think that the biggest weakness of gold is its tangibility, is its physical nature. Mm-hmm. Because oftentimes that it's much easier to steal, but more importantly, what happened throughout gold and silver standards is that money ends up being in just like 6 or 7 big banks or big central banks. And it's really hard to verify the supply, very hard to verify how much IOUs, how much debt there is, how much money supply there is, because of all the paper notes and derivatives. And I think the biggest weakness of fiat currency is time, because I think that its days are essentially over and it will be difficult for it to compete against digital currencies. But the biggest weakness of Bitcoin is probably apathy and ignorance.
Okay, what do you mean by apathy?
So a lot of people, first of all, Bitcoin is very complicated. It takes weeks, if not months, if not years, to understand it properly. and to like sort of understand exactly what is going on. It is a relatively complex technology, and the user experience, it still needs a lot of improvement, and we still need a lot more better like UI, UX, better packages, better just way to present this technology to others. We need a lot more education. We need much simpler guides, much simpler videos, much simpler explanations, more educational resources. We need more people to be aware of this technology. It is not as easy as a yellow piece of metal. It is not as easy as a piece of paper. It is a little bit more complicated with all the private keys and all the addresses and all the cold storage, all the hot wallets, etc. We need a lot of improvement. Of course, we're still in the infrastructure stage. In terms of apathy, I think like a lot of people just don't care. They just don't care about like the 2% that they might be losing per year, or even the 5% that they might be losing per year in their cash. A lot of people just don't really care about what the central bank's effects are having over 30 years in the future, what the credit debt ceilings are, what kind of effects that is having on our society, the financial markets, etc. So I guess to be interested in these technologies, you need to be interested in all these things, and you need to care about these things. But a lot of people just like don't care. And so all these 4 or 5 problems that I mentioned coming together, the most like it just needs time. I guess the success of cryptocurrencies to me, it's not about if. By now, it's obvious to me that they will succeed. It's more about when. And really, it will probably take 5, 10, 15 years for these things to sort of ramp up. But luckily, there are people that are working on these things, working on better solutions, better UX, more education. So I hope these problems will get resolved over time.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move into your famous price predictions about Bitcoin and the market as a whole. But before we start that, like you're an amazing maximalist. And what is the overall percentage of your wealth invested in crypto?
Right now, 0. Well, actually, no. Well, no, actually not 0. Right now, like 10% or 20%. But I essentially sold all my crypto in like late January, and just been holding cash or like the US dollars and waiting for the absolute bottom so that I can buy as cheaply as possible.
Okay, and how do you diversify your crypto? Is it altcoins and Bitcoin, or is there any specific percentage or any kind of separation between the typical asset groups like security or privacy coins, or is there any specific algorithm or strategy that you follow?
Yeah, so I think everyone should have at least half of their portfolio in Bitcoin, at least. Because if you actually like study all these coins, you realize that Bitcoin as of right now has the highest chances of success. However, in the short term, I think in the next cycle is going to be 2019 to 2023. And I think that unlike the last bubble in 2017, you will have fewer coins essentially pumping really hard. However, I still think, let's put it this way. I think in between 2019 and 2023, so bottom to top, I think Bitcoin will go somewhere between 30 and 40x.
Wow, so it is at least 50 grand then.
I think it will top at around like 120 or 130,000.
That's good. I should invest more than.
But I like to be realistic. A lot of people say that's going to be 2020, 2021. I think it's going to take some time, because actually I believe the cycles are getting longer. Because like the bigger the asset gets, like the slower it is to move very, very quickly. But I think late 2023.
Okay, but I think there's one point that I'm not sharing the same with you, which is the nature of human being won't change, and the greed is the quite strong nature of the human beings. There will be plenty of illiquid coins across the market. And what makes you think that people won't be pumping them as much as they used to do on the previous cycle.
Yeah. So sorry, I actually didn't finish. Yeah. So
sorry.
I think yeah, no problem. I think that Bitcoin will go 30 to 40x. But I think like half a dozen or a dozen altcoins will go 100x. Nice. So yes, I agree with you. I agree with you that a small amount, much smaller amount than last time, because people in general will be like market participants will be smarter, and I get like Wall Streets and funds are going to arrive to this market. Institutional players generally slightly more smarter money, so altcoins will pump, but not like every altcoin like last time. It's going to be more concentrated. I think things like Zcash, Monero, and Grin are going to do quite well. Probably a handful of smart contract platforms will do quite well. Like governance-focused coins will do quite well. Essentially, everything that is differentiating against Bitcoin in some way. But I essentially like coins that are trying to become money. Everything else, I am bearish on. I'm only bullish on coins that are actually trying to become a currency at some point. And I believe that in the very end, in the very, very long term, there's only going to be like 1, 2, 3, or 4 winners. And it's going to be like kind of winner take most. So there's only going to be like 3 or 4 dominant coins in the medium to long future. And I guess the biggest money is to be made trying to predict who like number 2 and 3 are going to be.
Okay, and my next question was about the coins or the currencies at all, and you briefly answered that you trust more on the currencies rather than the security or the utility tokens themselves, right? And I think you highlighted that you trust on the privacy coins as well. Is it fair to summarize like that, or do you want to add something on top of this?
Yeah, I think privacy coins will outperform, but to me, it's just a speculative play. It's not like a long-term hold. Let's put it this way. As I've already said, that store of value is the most important thing for now, for the next 6 or 7 years. And so we have to ask ourselves, what are the most important things for a store of value? And it's things like security, monetary policy, credibility of monetary policy, perceived trustworthiness, quality of engineers, etc. Like there's like 15 or 16 different things that we can discuss. And privacy is of course one of them. However, if you compare Monero and Zcash, for example, to Bitcoin, they are only better than Bitcoin in like 1 out of 15 important criteria. And that's of course privacy and fungibility. But all the other 14 remaining criteria, Bitcoin is like way farther ahead, much further ahead. So and you have to couple this with the fact that privacy in Bitcoin will improve. Lightning Network is quite private. We already have people working on CoinJoin, ZeroLink, Wasabi, Ricochet, Samurai Wallet stuff, and like a lot of little Dandelion, and a lot of little other things. And so Bitcoin already having such strong network effects, plus its privacy is also improving. I'm just not sure how much of the market can privacy coins take. And once like Bitcoin essentially becomes even bigger and solves the privacy issues, I'm afraid that it's very risky to be holding privacy coins. Their market caps could drop. And because this is open source software, a lot of the best technologies can be implemented in essentially any coin. So it's really hard to differentiate. Now, Zcash, Monero, Grin can pump in the next couple of years just because they're small and more illiquid. But I'm just not sure how sustainable that is. And it's not something that I'm comfortable like going away for 3 months and hodling as much, at least, as I am with Bitcoin, which I'm pretty sure is still going to be here in like 10 years.
Yeah, I really don't want to diversify the topic that we're talking about, but you briefly touched on the open source nature of the Bitcoin, and that reminded me to ask a question about it. How do you see the development process or the development speed of Bitcoin for the last couple of years? Do you really think that it is a proper open source that people can contribute, or it is not as much as you expected?
Yeah, so it's very, very strict. It's true. But I guess the philosophy is that because we're building like, it's like 100-year project. I know like all of us want to get rich like very quickly and make a lot of money very quickly, but the Bitcoin core team or the engineers in the space in general, they realize that these like Bitcoin and these cryptocurrencies in general, they need to be treated like a nuclear reactor or like a plane. And in the sense that they need to be extremely secure because they're securing tens of billions of dollars of wealth. So it's really important that they are reliable. And that's why all the tiny changes go through like weeks and months of review, and it takes a lot of time. And it's not like a small iPhone app, which you can change, you can break, you can experiment very, very quickly. This is more like surgery. And that's why it's like deliberately slow.
Well, fair point. If you go back to trading or investing point of view, I was about to ask if you actively trade or invest for a long term, but you briefly mentioned that you already sold most of your portfolio in January, and I assume you haven't been trading much since then.
Yeah, no, I actively trade all the time. It's essentially how I spend all day.
Amazing. Dream life for most of us. These are pretty much questions that I had in my mind, and unless you have something specific to share with us, any graphs, actually that will be very interesting. Is there any price predictions or any graphics that you would like to share with us? One of our guests asked, "What is the absolute bottom to you as well?" I'm skimming the chat conversations. I'm trying to find some questions for you.
Yeah, I think the bottom is going to be somewhere between 2,000 and like 2,600.
Okay, I think we fairly share the same view. It's nice to hear it from you.
I think like even 1,300 is possible theoretically if like things become very, very bearish and if the sentiment goes bad. But I still don't think that's going to happen. I think the bottom is going to be somewhere between like 22 and 2,700, somewhere in that area.
Okay, thank you very much. And I found one question which is from Kafka School. Let me translate it just a second. So what do you think about the potential financial craze, the effects of the potential financial craze on Bitcoin?
Yeah, so it really depends on what kind of crisis it is. If it's the same kind of crisis that we saw in 2008, which is more like a stock recession, and it's like a deflationary recession, then I don't think it's going to be good for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is still seen as a risky asset, and risky assets typically sell off very quickly during recessions because people need cash and people need safer like instruments, and they need to like buy more secure conservative stuff. So it's not going to be well. However, if anywhere in the world there is a huge currency crisis or a huge sovereign default crisis or like a massive like banking or credit crisis, if it's that kind of crisis, then Bitcoin could probably be very bullish because people would have to buy Bitcoin as one of the ways to get out, to diversify out of the bad currency, and people would also learn about the risks of currently mismanaged currencies. Same with like the banking stuff. It would be dangerous to be holding your wealth in particular banks, etc. So it really depends on the kind of crisis. However, in general, if it's like a stock market crash or actual economic slowdown, it's probably not very good for Bitcoin.
Thank you very much. And there's another question from Spectra, he's a popular miner in Turkey. And his question is about Bitcoin mining. So he's asking, what's your thoughts on Bitcoin mining? And do you see mining as a viable protection of a blockchain? Or do you have thoughts on centralization regarding the proof of work and the recent Bitcoin Cash split?
Yeah, so I think mining is awesome. I think proof of work is one of the most amazing inventions ever. A lot of people talk about its weaknesses with electricity and some of the other stuff, but I think it's completely fine. I think all those problems are overhyped. In my opinion, mining is relatively sustainable. The only two things I would say is that in the future, where there would be no more block rewards in terms of inflation, all miners would have to be incentivized by fees, and as such, the security of the system would depend on fees. there's a lot of uncertainty whether the Lightning Network and sidechains will increase the amount of fees on chain, or they will actually decrease the amount of fees on chain. And I can make arguments for both. Also, in general, whether there will even be enough fees for the system to be secure enough, because ideally you would want to, for annual revenue of miners, which is correlated with security, to be somewhere between 2 to 3% of the whole market cap. But like that ends up being a lot of money, which if we have small blocks on Bitcoin, it's probably going to be unsustainable because fees would just be extremely, extremely high. We'd probably see fees like $1,000 per transaction. So talking to a lot of engineers around Bitcoin and on Bitcoin, I believe that the consensus is that block size will increase, but it will happen like very slowly and very, very conservatively. And there's a lot of other optimizations that can be made for to reduce sort of fees and to increase the volumes per block. So we want a lot of volumes per block. We want the on-chain transactions to be very, very rich, very lively, and to sort of continue flowing.
Oh, thank you very much, Murad. And I found another question from our guests called Poetic. Basically asking the news around backed ETF or Trump, you know, with the speculation nature of the crypto assets, those kind of news make a big difference in the price. What are your thoughts about the ETF news or the backed news on Bitcoin?
I think those are awesome developments, but they will be more important like a year or a year and a half from now. I don't think it's something that can reverse this bear market. I think that bull markets stop when there's no more buyers. Bear markets stop when there's no more sellers. I think that people look for things like backed and ETF, like a hero to come in and save the princess, but it doesn't really happen like that. These developments are good, but more good in the medium and long term. For the foreseeable future, I think they're overhyped. And irregardless whether they're like backed or ETF actually work or don't work, that's not really why Bitcoin price will move.
Well, I kind of agree. And also I would like to add that something similar in that aspect is usually the bear market ends when the FUD news can't put the price more down than it is right now, and the same thing applies for the bull market as well. And there's another question from Unqual. I don't even know how to pronounce his name, nickname. He's asking if IMF is talking about their own cryptocurrencies on corrupt central banks. That's his view, and he made it bold, in fact. How will that impact the Bitcoin?
Can you ask the question again, please?
Sure, sorry for that. IMF is talking about their own cryptocurrencies on the corrupt central banks. How will this impact on the Bitcoin?
You mean if central banks issue their own cryptocurrency?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So if something like that happens, Bitcoin adoption will grow even faster, because essentially you will now have two digital currencies. So people will look, okay, this one is decentralized, this one is centralized. This one is disinflationary, this one is inflationary. This one is immutable, this one is not immutable. They will say this one is seizable, freezable, this one is not seizable. This one is private, this one is not private. So you would essentially put two exact pieces of technology side by side. You will have so many tables all across the internet comparing the two. I actually think that if central banks issue their own digital currency, it will actually accelerate Bitcoin adoption. And it will be little other than an on-ramp for even more people to become Bitcoin hodlers.
Wow, you had plenty of support with this answer. They're thinking about this amazing answer to you. I'm not sure if you can see the conversations, but yeah.
Actually, what's the link?
Sorry?
What's the link?
Let me share you the Discord link, invite link, or Sconch, would you please share it with Murad? Right now it's not in front of me. But by the way, that it's Turkish. How's your Turkish, by the way?
Yeah, so like when I read, I can kind of understand a lot of it, when I listen, I can also understand like maybe 60-70% of it. But when I like my speech is like really not that good.
Wish I knew that. I would have talked in Turkish. Anyway, here it is. Just a sec. I'll send it through the Hangouts.
Oh, is it Muhabbit Discord?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I found it.
There's.
Yeah, I'm really happy that both to you guys and to your sort of members and watchers, I'm really happy that the community in Turkey is growing. Like we actually need all the places around the world to have like more education, more knowledge, and more ownership of these assets. And like tell all your friends, tell everybody, like this is we need sort of the virus to spread. And I really think that it's going to keep on happening, especially like from the young people, from the computer-minded, like technologically enabled people. This is just absolutely the future of money.
Yeah, and if you have joined to Discord, the conversations are on Muhabbit Sohbet channel, and
got it.
There are plenty of funny questions. One of them is, isn't he ashamed that he sold all his bitcoins around 20K in the beginning of January? So yeah.
No, I'm not ashamed. No, I'm not ashamed, because I think that there is a lot of money to be made by buying the bottoms and selling the tops.
Yeah,
and I will I will keep on doing that for many years.
I think that I was just teasing. It wasn't a proper question.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, how is the community in Azerbaijan? Are you involved as much over there?
I mean, I spend like most of the year in New York, actually. So whenever I am in Azerbaijan, there's really not that many like people here that know about this stuff. So I literally spend most of the day on the internet, just like learning and interacting with like more like the global community.
Okay, and what kind of exchanges are you? Well, maybe it's a bit personal. Maybe you wouldn't want to share that due to the nature of the states and all that stuff. But
it's fine. It's fine. Like I use a couple of American exchanges and a couple of like Asian exchanges as well. And like I do some OTC trades as well, but like more personally.
Well, thank you very much for joining tonight, Murad. That was an amazing stream. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I really appreciate a lot for all the detailed answers for all the questions. We really would love to host you more often, and maybe even in Turkish, and we will really expand our community to Azerbaijan as well. Please give us a shout if you know any community over there. We would like to get in touch with them.
Yeah, for sure. And just thank you so much for the invite. Happy to come back maybe in a couple of months again to discuss more developments. Hope to sort of be in touch with you guys more.
Okay, thank you very much. Good night.